Her life was sad since childhood. She was born into a large family, fifth child. Her father was a heavy drinker. Her mother was always busy with her affairs or other children. She was very lonely. She felt no one needed her. The grief happened when Mary was 6 years old. Her father died. The times began terribly. They didn't have enough money all the time, but they had good people who brought food and clothes. Her mother fell into depression when Mary's father died. Mom's tantrums happened quite often, as well as nervous breakdowns. Her mother took her anger out on the children. She yelled at them constantly, sometimes even beat them. Her mother didn't love Mary and got hurt a lot, but she was the smallest and couldn't defend herself. She was punished for every wrongdoing. Mary was troubled with her mother for the bruises and for calling her names, insulting and humiliating her. Mary would sometimes close herself to her mother in the toilet and scratch the wall with a pen about her unbearable life. Mary's childhood was just like that. Mary moved to the 7th grade and met a girl named Bella as her class was new. Bella was a pariah. No one was friends with her, and all her classmates shunned her. But Mary decided to go against everyone. The class hated both girls. The break at school was a nightmare. Mary and Bella were throwing dirty rags at coated clothes with chalk. Bullying of girls became permanent at school, and Mary switched to homeschooling. She graduated with difficulty. Mary got her first job at 17. She was washing dishes in the dining room. She became a kitchen worker 6 months later, and then she got a job as a cook. Mary had been working for 2 years in the cafeteria, where the men who liked her often went. She met Adam there. Mary fell in love quickly, and they moved in together. Adam often went away on business trips, and Mary was very painfully separated. Adam went away on another business trip, and Mary couldn't get through to Adam all day, and the next morning a woman answered her phone and told her that Adam was asleep. Mary hung up on her, at which point the whole world collapsed. Her tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't understand why Adam did this to her because she loved him so much. They were married together. After a while, Mary forgot about Adam. She often walked along the waterfront alone and thought of life. Adam was waiting for her in a dark alley with a knife one night. He grabbed Mary from behind, hit the building hard, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her in the ribs. Mary was shaking with fear and horror. She could not yet understand that Adam was standing behind her. He turned her around after 2 minutes, and she was stunned. Adam was high. His eyes were angry, full of rage. He grabbed Mary's hand, but did not remove the knife. He dragged her down to the road. His car was there and ordered me to go with him. Adam brought her to the apartment. Then they spent the night together, and by the morning, Adam had fallen asleep, and Mary had managed to escape. Mary avoided Adam and did not return his calls. She met another man in the dining room at the time, Jack. Jack came from out of town for work. They started seeing each other a lot. Jack would walk Mary home every night, and one night Adam was waiting for them outside the house. The men began to fight, and Mary ran home. Jack won the fight, and Adam left Mary alone. Jack asked Mary to marry them after 6 months, and she agreed. Their wedding was modest, with only relatives. Mary got pregnant 3 months later. Her pregnancy was difficult. She often lay in the hospital. Her child was born on time, but frail. He was often ill and developmentally challenging. The child became very sick when he was 1.5 years old. The doctors didn't think much of his illness. They said it was just a cough, prescribed him pills, and sent them home. The baby began to feel very bad. Mary called an ambulance 4 days later. The baby had a high fever. Unfortunately, the child died in the hospital 3 days later. It was pneumonia, which his weak body could not cope with. Mary had not spoken to anyone for 3 weeks. She prayed every day and cried, and Mary did not understand why her life punished her. Then Mary decided to divorce her husband 2 months later. She had no feelings for him. He came home one day not sober, and Mary decided to talk to him about the divorce. He beat her very badly that evening. Jack was kicking and punching her. Mary was drowning in tears, begging Jack to stop hitting her. His punch was powerful. Jack kneed Mary on the head. Mary passed out. Jack became sober the following day. He realized what he had done. Mary filed a police report on Jack at the time. Jack was called to the police, and after talking to the police, he returned home, Jack kneeling and begging Mary to withdraw the statement from the police. Mary was very angry with Jack, but agreed to start the application if they divorced quickly. Jack agreed. The property was sold, and the money was divided equally. Mary was trying to forget what had happened to her over the past few years. She called her friend Gwen, who had been friends for a long time, and Mary called her to meet her. Gwen was popular with men, so she had many friends. She brought Mary to her friends. There were many handsome, charming men, but Mary only noticed one. Michael turned out to be. He was tall, slim, and hilarious. He grew up in a good family. His father was a prosecutor. Michael went to police school, but never graduated from police school. He tried to work as a lawyer, but failed. He did not work permanently. They quickly hit it off. Michael went to work for a month. They called each other every day and got much closer. They started dating a month later. Michael was very romantic, sometimes gentle. He asked Mary to live together. She moved into his house. Everything changed at one point when his father died. Michael suddenly became very angry and cruel. His father gave him money and protected him from crime before, and everything changed at one point. Mary and Michael ran out of cash. Michael was left in debt, and Mary was threatened. Mary worked as a small store salesman then and had barely enough money to buy groceries and pay utility bills. Michael owed a lot of money, so they had to move to another town because they threatened his whole family. They moved to the big city, rented an apartment, and started a new life. Mary was trying to find a job, and Michael was pretending to look for a job. He wasn't going to work. Money started running out. Michael's mom sent them more money, but she said it was the last time. Soon, that money was running out. The rent had to be paid. Mary sold her computer out of despair. The money came from the sale. It was enough for a month. Mary was sitting by the window and didn't know what to do. There was no money left, no job, no rent. A fight arose amidst these problems between Michael and Mary ran into the bedroom and closed the door, and Michael was furious, and he broke down the bathroom door. He realized what he had done, told her to pack her things, and said they were leaving the next day. Michael called his friend, and he came to pick them up. Michael's friend took them to Michael's grandmother's. Mary got a job after 1 month, and she got a job at a small bakery. She worked every day because there was no money. Michael lay on the couch all day, and when his grandmother kicked him out of the house, he didn't come back sober and angry. Michael said a week later that he had found a job. The job was at the construction site. He left every day in the morning and returned in the evening. He promised that the money would be paid, but later, Michael didn't bring the money, even after 2 weeks. Mary had saved up money for that time to get a room. Michael took the money gladly and started looking for a place to live. They didn't move in. They kept living with Grandma. Mary started talking to Michael about renting. He seemed nervous, and she realized he was lying. He stole his grandmother's money, and it turns out he was drinking and living for a while. And then he started gambling and needed more money. Mary gave him the money to rent a place, and he lost it. Mary was desperate. She got involved with an alcoholic, gambler, and thief in the same person. Michael was proud and was not ashamed to tell everyone that his dad was a prosecutor. Everything was revealed, and then there was a terrible scandal. Michael grabbed Mary by the hair and began to beat her in front of his grandmother. Mary had endured everything. She had nowhere to go. Mary was almost broke, and home was a long way away. Grandma left after 1 month and left their things on the landing. They spent 3 days on their belongings at the entrance. Michael called his mother, who sent a car to pick them up. They came home. Mary got a job back at the store, and Michael took his time with work. He had spent his father's money before and didn't want to do anything. Michael started drinking a lot of alcohol from idleness. Life was unbearable for Mary. He caused her scandals at work and insulted and humiliated her. Mary called the police often. Michael avoided responsibility because he had many friends among the police. Mary tried to break up with Michael. He stalked her, threatened her, and beat her on the street. She was afraid to leave work sometimes to go home. Michael's mom told her she was sick of it. She blamed Mary for choosing Michael. Michael stopped drinking a month later, started acting normal, and they started dating again. Michael got a good job as a driver 4 months later. The business trip dragged on, he didn't pick up his phone all day, and the next morning a girl answered his phone and said that Michael didn't want to talk to Mary. The world collapsed for the second time. Mary didn't believe it was happening to her. The story repeated itself as with Adam. Mary was in utter despair. She didn't want to see anyone. She didn't talk to anyone. Mary shut down and became depressed. She couldn't survive the betrayal again because she forgave Michael so much, tolerated his abuse, and he did that to her. Mary saw only one way out. Mary met a lovely man named Tom on Tinder. He lived in a different city and invited Mary to come and meet him. Mary decided a month later. She took some things and visited Tom. The acquaintance was excellent. They spent a wonderful 3 weeks together, but had to return home. Tom only let Mary go on the condition that she return in 1 month and move in with him forever. Mary settled all her problems in 1 month, packed her things, and moved in with Tom. She wanted to leave all her memories of resentment at home and never think about them. After all, she was finally going to have a good life. Mary had moved in with Tom. A year had passed since then. Mary felt beautiful. No one had ever hurt her in that house. The nerves returned to normal. Mary became much calmer. The man was with Mary, who cared for her, not bullied her. Tom was a hard-working and responsible man. He never humiliated or betrayed Mary, so she loved and valued him so much. They often went for a walk in the woods. Mary remembered walking alone, and now her walks were always with Tom. He supported her always, even in the most foolish endeavors. Mary turned 30 today and became happy. She managed to forgive all those who hurt her. She was able to forget almost all the terrible things she did. She became much kinder to everyone and learned to trust people again. Life began with a new line. Now all the bad things are behind us.